And the same applies to what the Commission representative has just said. Very interesting comments. Working on an issue such as this is fascinating because there's new stuff, new news every day. And you really do have to keep up to date. Keep an eye on the papers and so on and so forth. And probably when this document is voted on, a number of things will have happened. There will be new events which we'll have to keep up with. But that's the nature of the beast. It's a living thing. Anyway, I'll take into account all the comments made, and I believe that we can carry on working now to polishing up a resolution. But as I said before, my role in this drafting this report has been a humble one, and I have to say I'm very grateful to all the help I've had from my staff and from fellow members. Now, as you know, on the 4th of May, we'll be holding a hearing with experts. So we'll have an opportunity for a debate with these highly qualified people on the 4th of May.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to add that on the 6th of May, that'll be the deadline for the amendments. So now let's move on to the next point on the agenda, number 9, enforcement of intellectual property rights in the internal market. The rapporteur is our colleague Paul Rübig. May I give him the floor? So thank you very much, Chairman. Intellectual property rights, copyright, these are the issues that we're looking at in very great detail at the moment, because the global speed of communication has increased considerably, and we're talking not only about technical capacity for transfer of information and transfer rates for the use of the internet, and looking at all of the various technical possibilities. So it's not just a question of the technical basis for this, but it's also a question of content as well, and which types of content can be provided as part of a system of rules in the EU. So we need to have provisions which are technology neutral and make it possible to provide services across borders. And so for that reason it is very important for us to have a collective declaration of rights, and that is why we decided to develop a concept of a one-stop EU-wide licensing option. So this would mean that you can it would make things easier both for those creating the content and those using the content. It's a way of achieving a balanced system, and this is particularly important for the EU. We need to have a clear framework, and for that reason, and we've had discussions with the European Broadcasting Union. We met with them yesterday and today. This is a way of providing new opportunities, and for that reason we need to ask the Commission to create a clear system for copyright. Now, I think the key point is that for intellectual property we also need to have an internal market. So we shouldn't have borders. There shouldn't be difficult bureaucratic hurdles for SMEs. In fact, it should be quite the opposite. We should be looking at consumer rights. We should be looking at the rights of citizens as consumers and making it possible for them to access content in their language right across Europe, and not have all sorts of restrictions which mean that it's not possible for an EU citizen to receive content in his or her language in another country in the EU. I think that's a very basic principle. We have 23 languages, and each language has its own characteristics and its own importance. And as a German speaker, when I am in Spain, I want to be able to look at French content, for instance, or when I'm in another country. I think that this is a right that all citizens should have. They should be able to get content which has been produced in their language, and to be able to consume that content right across Europe, across borders. And the consumers define the markets, and as a component of cultural identity, it is important that all citizens have access to this content, irrespective of whether or not of the technology. It must be possible for citizens to access content in their language right across Europe. Legally. And I think that we've found a good approach here, and I'd be happy to discuss any possible amendments people would like to see incorporated, and these could perhaps be incorporated orally for tomorrow. We have to produce the position, but I think that our committee should be setting a framework in which Europe can develop. And I think the discussions that we have had so far, and for that I would like to thank all of the groups. I think the discussions we've had have been very positive, and I think that we will achieve a positive outcome. Thank you.
Bedanke mich herzlich.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments? Colleague Tikau?
First.
Mulțumesc.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Shadow Rapporteur, I'd like to thank the author of the report, Mr. Rubik, for the cooperation that we've had, and especially for what he said in his reports. The topic is indeed a most interesting one of immediate current interest. Even so, I'd like to point out the fact that licenses at European level granting European coverage can be mentioned and discussed only once we've had an impact assessment, because we need to take into account the specificity of each industrial sector involved. There's a distinct situation as compared to another field. For instance, if you compare movies to music, so the situation might differ, and we need an impact study for that. Also, I'd like to draw attention to paragraph 2. It deals with licenses based on the basis of language. I suggested an amendment, amendment number 6. And basically this amendment suggests that we might actually give the possibility to have dubbing or subtitling in order to make sure that one particular kind of content is available in more languages than just one. And here I perfectly understand the proposal made by Mr. Rubik. I might actually have an oral amendment in this respect. And to the initial amendment number 6, I might add something like, as well as for consumers, giving them access to the content in the language in which it was produced. And this way we manage to reflect both the interest of consumers who might want to access it in the original language, but this would also give the possibility to broadcast that content in several other languages, but, and this is very important, without having a license based on language. This might lead to monopolies and to very high prices for the major languages. And for smaller languages, this might also cause problems. Distributors might not be interested in purchases, licenses for content in that particular small language. Also, there's no European policy in the field of languages.